जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेद गाय जहाँ रचयितो वेद गाय जहाँ रचयितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आतम जनरा बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आतम जनरा बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना शिला प्रभुपाद लोकेरा जीवाना हा प्रभु कर दया देहो मोरे पत छया हा प्रभु कर दया देहो मोरे पद छाया बेजाज गुसुक त्रिभुवना शिला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना दुआ पदे लैला शरण बेजाज गुसुक त्रिभुवना जय प्रभुपदा प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निते नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो मोरे तुम बिना के दयालु जगत संसारे पतित पावन हेतु तब अवतार मौसम पतिता प्रभु न पाइबे यार प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रेमानंद सुखी कृपा बलो कना करो आमी बड़ो दुखी प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रेमानंद सुखे कृपा बलोकन करो आमी बड़ दुखे दया करो सीतापते अद्वैता गोसाई तब कृपा बल पाई चैतन्य निताय स्वरूप सनातन रूप रघुना बट जुगा श्री जीवा प्रभु लोकनाथ स्वरूप सनातन रूप रघुना बट जुग श्री जीवा प्रभु लोकनाथ दया करो श्री आचार्य प्रभु श्रीनिवास रामचंद्र संग मागे नरोत्तम दास कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Shyama Sundar Radha Shyama Sundar Radha Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribol. Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Pratika Acharya Ashtotota the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Baba Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mahi Ki Jai. Yamuna Mahi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada's arrival day ki jai. So I'll read from Planting the Seed. After a 35-day journey from Calcutta, the Jaladuta reached Boston's Commonwealth Pier at 5:30 a.m. on September 17, 1965. The ship was to stop briefly in Boston before proceeding to New York City. Among the first things Srila Prabhupada saw in America were the letters A and P painted on a pierfront warehouse. The gray waterfront dawn revealed the ships in the harbor, a conglomeration of lobster stands and drab buildings, and rising in the distance, the Boston skyline. Prabhupada had to pass through U.S. Customs and Immigration in Boston. His visa allowed him a 3-month stay, and an official stamped it to indicate his expected date of departure. Captain Pandya invited Prabhupada to take a walk into Boston, where the captain intended to do some shopping. They walked across a footbridge into a busy commercial area with old churches, warehouses, office buildings, bars, tawdry bookshops, nightclubs, and restaurants. Prabhupada briefly observed the city, but the most significant thing about his short stay in Boston, aside from the fact that he had now set foot in America, was that at Commonwealth Pier he wrote another Bengali poem entitled Markine Bhagavat Dharma, Teaching Krishna Consciousness in America. Some of the verses he wrote on board the ship that day are as follows. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me, but I guess you have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of ignorance and passion. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva Krishna. I do not know how they will be able to understand it, but I know that your causeless mercy can make everything possible, because you are the most expert mystic. How will they understand the mellows of devotional service, O Lord? I am simply praying for your mercy so that I will be able to convince them about your message. All living entities have come under the control of the illusory energy by your will, and therefore, if you like, by your will, they can also be released from the clutches of illusion. I wish that you may deliver them. Therefore, if you so desire their deliverance, then only will they be able to understand your message. How will I make them understand this message of Krishna consciousness? I am very unfortunate, unqualified, and the most fallen. Therefore, I am seeking your benediction so that I may convince them, for I am powerless to do so on my own. Somehow or other, O Lord, you have brought me here to speak about you. Now, my Lord, it is up to you to make me a success or failure, as you like. O spiritual master of all the worlds, I can simply repeat your message. So if you like, you can make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Only by your causeless mercy will my words become pure. I am sure that when this transcendental message penetrates their hearts, they will certainly feel gladdened and thus become liberated from all unhappy conditions of life. O Lord, I am just like a puppet in your hands. So if you have brought me here to dance, then make me dance. Make me dance, O Lord, make me dance as you like. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I have been designated Bhaktivedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta. Signed, the most unfortunate, insignificant beggar, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, on board the ship Jaladuta, Commonwealth Pier, Boston, Massachusetts, USA, dated 18 September 1965. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And then the rest of it is history. All of us are here. All of us are here because of that. And Nagaraj Prabhu will give class today. Here are the devotees who have assisted their guru in dressing the deities. Sri Sri Radhesham were dressed by Mother Shama Priya, Chota Radhesham by Mother Guru Prasad, Sri Sri Krishna Balaram by Mother Nanda, Chota Krishna Balaram Mother Sarala, Sri Sri Gaurnitai by Mother Manjari Sundari, Chota Gaurnitai by Mother Gandharvika, and the Gurus and Lord Nishingadev by Mother Govinda Sangini.
Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtotarashta Shri Shimaresi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Gaur Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Gauranga. Hare Krishna Krishna Bhakti Vedanta Swami Pranamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charini Nidhi Shri Pashta Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 49, Akrura's mission in Hastinapur. In the Krishna book, this chapter is called Ill-Motivated Dhritarashtra. This is text today 14 through 19. Text 14, a word meaning, Sri Shuka Uvacha, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Iti, as expressed in these words, Anusmritya, remembering, Swajanam, her own relatives, Krishnam, Krishna, Cha, and Jagat, of the universe, Ishwaram, the Supreme Lord, Prarudat, she cried loudly, Dukhita, unhappy, Rajan, O King, Parikshit, Bhavatam, of your good self, Prapita Mahi, the great-grandmother. Shri Shukuvacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Shri Shukuvacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Shri Shukuvacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Shri Shukuvacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Ladies. Shri Shukuvacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagarishwaram Prarudadhukitarajan Shrishuravacha Ityanusmritya Swajanam Krishnam cha Jagadishwaram Raruda Dhukitarajan Avatam Vatikamahi. Translation. Shukadeva Goswami said, thus meditating on her family members and also on Krishna, the Lord of the universe, your great-grandmother Kunti Devi began to cry out in grief, O king. You can chant along with me. Samadukha sukha kruro vidurascha mahayasha santvayam kuntim taputropati hetubi. Both Akrura, who shared Queen Kunti's distress and happiness, and the illustrious Vidura consoled the queen by reminding her of the extraordinary way her sons had taken birth. Purport. Akrura and Vidura reminded Queen Kunti that her sons were born of heavenly gods and thus could not be vanquished like ordinary mortals. In fact, an extraordinary victory awaited this most pious family. Yasyan rajanam abhyetya vishamam putra lalasam avadat suridam madhye bandhubhi suridottam. The ardent affection King Dhritarashtra felt for his sons had made him act unjustly toward the Pandavas. Just before leaving, Akrura approached the king, who was seated among his friends and supporters, and related to him the message that his relatives, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, had sent out of friendship. Akrura uvacha bhovo vaichitra viryatvam kurunam kirtivardhana bhattaryuparate pandha aduna sanamastita. Akrura said, O my dear son of Vichitravirya, O enhancer of the Kuru's glory, your brother Pandu having passed away, you have now assumed the royal throne. Purport. Akrura was speaking ironically, since the young sons of Pandu should actually have been occupying the throne. Upon the death of Pandu, they were too young to immediately govern, and so were put in Dhritarashtra's care. But now sufficient time had passed, and their legitimate rights should have been recognized. Dharmena palayan urvim braja shilaranjayan vartamana samahasveshu shreya kirtim avapsyasi. By religiously protecting the earth, delighting your subjects with your noble character, and treating all your relatives equally, you will surely achieve success and glory. Purport. Akrura told Dhritarashtra that even though he had usurped the throne, if he now ruled according to the principles of dharma and behaved properly, he could be successful. And the last verse. Anyata cha chalaloke garhido yasya se tamaha tasmat samatve vartasva aneshu najeshu cha. If you act otherwise, however, people will condemn you in this world, and in the next life you will enter the darkness of hell. Remain equally disposed, therefore, toward Pandu's sons and your own. Purport. Dhritarashtra's whole problem was his excessive attachment to his nasty sons. That was the fatal flaw that caused his downfall. There was no lack of good advice from all sides, and Dhritarashtra even admitted that the advice was sound, but he could not follow it. One can have clear, practical intelligence when the mind and heart are pure. Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. we're changing rasas from what we just read, practically the highest thing in all of our books, Radharani's Song of the Bee, a couple of chapters ago. Now here we are in Pandava Leela. So it's all purifying. Here we get glimpses of some of the subjects that are spoken about in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata, of course, Srila Prabhupada didn't translate it, but he spoke from it, obviously. It's such an immense book. There's only one English translation of the whole thing by K.M. Ganguly. I just discovered the whole thing's online, actually. Mahabharataonline.com. So it's an extremely long book, and there's a lot. Actually, recently we have hanging around at BTG. There's a book called A Mahabharata Companion, and it has a breakdown, just a few sentences about every single chapter of the Mahabharata. So what I noticed as I was going through that was that some of the things that we have, because the Srimad Bhagavatam, a lot of draws from different places, gives stories and instructions and things from other things that took place at other times. So one example is Bhishma Dev speaking to the Yudhishthir, just as when he's on the bed of arrows about to pass away. So we have some of that, one chapter in the Bhagavatam, part of that chapter we hear sort of an overview of Bhishma's instructions. But in the Mahabharata, it goes on and on and on, several chapters, details about all kinds of different things that Bhishma spoke about. So, one thing is we shouldn't look down our noses at the Mahabharata and think it's some inferior literature. Of course, it's not the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is the pressed jewel of the Vedic literature. But the Mahabharata certainly has its place. And it was written by Vyasadeva to help people like us, actually people higher than us, who are considered fallen by Vedic culture. Stri Shudra Dvija Bandhu Nam. I was thinking this term, Dvija Bandhu, so friend of the twice-born. So I didn't even have any twice-born friends. Before I came, never even knew what a twice-born was, what to speak of having a friend. So that's elevated compared to where we're coming from. So the Mahabharata actually has a lot of very, very good instruction in it. And it all centers on the story of the Pandavas, really, Krishna's pure devotees, and it leads up, of course, to the Bhagavad Gita. It's often glorified just for that, just because it contains the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's immortal instructions. So in these verses that we're reading today, and just in the course of, from the beginning of the chapter, we hear about a lot of these different characters from the Mahabharata. And I thought maybe do a little review. I had to review myself because I only read the Mahabharata, one version of it, many, many years ago. So I was looking around trying to understand, remember some of these characters and what the situations were and so on. So the first thing which is noted here in this one of the verses that we read is that Akrura is addressing Dhritarashtra as the son of Vichitravirya. So we all know this name, Vichitravirya, but if I were to ask you, can you tell me the history of Vichitravirya, you might say, how does that go now? That's what I had to do. He got tuberculosis, you're right. Or consumption, I think it's also called. So we'll go back, we'll trace it back a little bit to Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev, of course, he's an extremely important personality. He's one of the Mahajans, but in the Mahabharata also he plays such a vital role. So Bhishma Dev had an interesting birth. His, actually we have to go back to Ganga Devi. She's a Deva, of course, Ganga Devi. So she was associating, or she was in the assembly of Lord Brahma, and some wind came and blew part of her garment, so part of her body was exposed. And some other person, now who was that? I'm going to be forgetting names right and left here, I'm sure. Mahabhisha. Chirikram knows all of these things. So this person named Mahabhisha, he looked at her and they both fell in love, or they had some lustful glances at least, looking at each other in the assembly of Brahma. So Brahma said, well, you're going to have to pay for this. So he cursed Ganga. She was going to have to take birth in the world of mortals, that lowly place. And both of them, and also this Mahabhisha. So Mahabhisha, he took birth as Shantanu, right? And Ganga Devi, well, she came down to the earth. So in the meantime, or sometime around this time, the 8 Vasus, they enter into the story. One thing I came across in researching this, I'm pretty sure this is bona fide because I found the references that I found to these things, most of them were to this Ganguly's translation of the Mahabharata. So that seems to be pretty much authoritative. He had translated the whole book, word for word, basically. So it's described there that these 8 Vasus, they represent earth, water, fire, air, sky, sun, moon, and stars, I think is how it goes. These 8, either they're personifications of them or however we conceive of it, but they represent them. So these 8 Vasus, they were traveling around, and the wife of one of those Vasus, named Dyaur, D-Y-A-U-R, who represents the sky, saw this beautiful cow. And what is she called? Nandini, Vasishta's wish-fulfilling cow, and her calf. And she said, oh, look at that nice cow. I'd like to have that cow and give it to my friend, the daughter of King Ushinara, whose name comes up now and then. So they stole the cow. Vasishta was away, and he came back, and he heard about it, and of course he's powerful enough to get the cow back. And what did he do? He cursed, of course. That's what happens in the Mahabharata. So he cursed them that they would have to take birth as mortals. Actually, these 8 Vasus, often you'll come across the term, the 30 demigods, Tridasha, right? 30 demigods. All right? Sometimes it says 30, but it's actually 31 or 33. So these 8 Vasus are among those. Generally, the main are listed as the Dwadashadityas, the 12 sons of Aditi, the 8 Vasus, and 11 Rudras. Those especially are in the 30, Tridasha. So the 8 Vasus. So they also had to take birth. They were cursed to take birth, and they begged for forgiveness. So Vasishta said, okay, you'll all return within 1 year of your birth, except for Dyaur, the Vasu whose wife, he was the main person instigating the whole thing. So you have to stay longer. So after they were cursed, they came across Ganga Devi, and somehow there was some discussion. She said, hey, I was cursed too. And well, maybe we can take birth as your sons. All right, so they worked out a deal. So this Shantanu, one day, he was actually before that, the father of Shantanu, I forget what his name was, Prati something. He was a king, and he was on the bank of the Ganga one day performing austerities apparently. And Ganga Devi saw him, was attracted, and went and sat on his knee. But she sat on his right knee. And she said, oh, I want you to be my husband. And he said, well, you can't be my wife because the right knee is for the daughter or the daughter-in-law. If you'd sat on my left knee, then maybe something could have happened, but sorry. So he said, but you can marry my son. When I have a son, you can marry my son. So later he had a son who was Shantanu. So Shantanu, he was at and actually his father told him, someday some celestial maiden is going to appear to you and you'll marry her, but don't do anything, don't cross her in any way. So of course Shantanu met Ganga Devi and he wanted to marry her. And she said, okay, on the condition that whatever I do, you never disagree with me or cross me in any way. So I think we all know what happened. She started having children, and as soon as the child was born, she threw the child into the Ganga. And Shantanu thought this was a little strange behavior for a mother, but he went along with it for 7 of them. So in this way, 7 of the Vasus were quickly liberated from their curse. But the 8th Vasu, Dhyawar, when it was time, when he was born, then Shantanu said, all right, I had enough of this. So he said, stop, don't kill this child. So she said, okay, I'm out of here. She left with the child. And so Bhishma Dev, there he was. Shantanu didn't have a wife anymore. But 32 years later, he was near the Ganga, and he noticed that the Ganga was not flowing like it usually does. It was like someone had dammed it up. So he looked around and he found there was this young boy, not a young boy, a young man, I guess by that time. And with his arrows, he had dammed up the Ganga, at least partially, so it wasn't flowing. So Shantanu, he had some intuition that maybe he knew who this was, but he wasn't quite sure. So he called Ganga. He was inspired to pray to her. So she appeared before him, and she said, yes, this is your son. His name is Devavrata, and he's been trained up. I've trained him up, and Vasishta, we've trained him up in all the military arts, and trained him up in all the Vedas. And because, of course, Ganga Devi, she's a Devi, so she has connections. So he was trained up with the greatest teachers in all kinds of arts and all knowledge. So he was extremely qualified person. So sometime later, King Shantanu, of course he didn't have a wife. He had a son, but no wife. So he was attracted, he was near the Yamuna River, and he smelled this heavenly fragrance. And he discovered it was coming from this maiden, young woman. And her name was Kasturi Gandhi, right? Gandhi. Gandhi. So the fragrance of kasturi, or musk. So she didn't always smell like this. In fact, she used to smell like a fish. Her name was Satyavati. Now her story is an interesting one too. There was someone, what was his name? Akrita or Adrita? Was that it? You remember? Nobody? Anyway, so this person was also cursed to be a fish for some reason. So this fish, he was swimming around in the Yamuna one day, and this person whose name also comes up once in a while, his name is Upari Charavasu. Upari Charavasu. That name, he could move around. I think he had a special chariot that Indra gave him, and he could sort of fly around here and there. This Upari Charavasu, one day he went out to, I think he was a king, and he went out to hunt. A lot of bad things seem to happen when kings go out to hunt. So he went out to hunt one day, and he left his wife at home. But when he was out in the forest, he started thinking about his wife, and the atmosphere in the forest was it was springtime, so he got spring fever, and he discharged semen. And he didn't want to waste his semen, so he put it in a leaf, and he gave it to an eagle to take to his wife. So this eagle was flying through the sky with this leaf in his beak, and another eagle saw it and said, "Oh, that looks like something to eat." So they had a big fight, and as a result, the semen fell down and was eaten by this fish in the water. And the fish gave birth to two. The fish was caught by a king, and there were 2 babies inside, a male and a female. And the male became, appropriately enough, his name was Matsya. And he was we hear sometimes the Kurus and the Matsyas, these different dynasties. So this was the start of the Matsya dynasty. And the girl, she was given the name, well actually she was called Kali, also because she had a dark complexion. And because she smelled like a fish, she was called Matsya Gandhana, or Gandhini, one who smells like a fish. But now we bring on to the scene Parashara Muni. So Parashara Muni, somehow he was attracted to her. She was raised by a ferryman, a fisherman, I guess, but he also ferried people across the water in a boat. So she was doing that. So the story goes that he was attracted to her, and he, on an island in the river, he created some kind of illusory fog or something, made the whole place dark, and they conceived a child. And this child, of course, Parashara Muni, he's not an ordinary person. It's from Parashara Muni that we get the definition of Bhagavan. So Parashara Muni is also the author of the Vishnu Purana, I'm pretty sure, the speaker of it. So he restored her maidenhood, and the young boy, he quickly grew up. Another thing that Parashara Muni was, he gave her the fragrance of kasturi rather than fish. And this boy who was born was Vyasadeva, Dvaipayana. Actually, he's called Krishna because he was dark, but Krishna means dark. Dvaipayana because he was born on the Dvipa. And then later he was called Veda Vyas because Vyas means to divide. He divided the Vedas. That's how he got all these different names. So Vyasadeva, as soon as he was born, he grew up quickly, like right away, and he wanted to just perform austerities. So he told his mother, I'm going to the Himalayas, I'm going to perform austerities. And he said, but I'll give you this blessing that whenever you want me, just think of me or invoke me in your thoughts and I'll arrive there. So now we'll go back to King Shantanu. King Shantanu, he came across Ganga and he wanted to marry her, and then the whole thing took place where the father said, no, because if you're married, then my sons won't be heirs to the throne. Your son, you already have a son, and he'll be an heir to the throne. So then Bhishmadev heard it. Then Shantanu, he was heartbroken. He went home, and he was just lying in bed and lamenting, and he was lovesick. He couldn't have the object of his desire. So Bhishmadev found out about this. So he went to the father, and then that's where Bhishmadev made to the girl's father, Satyavati's father. Yes. Satyavati. Her name is also Satyavati. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say Ganga? I'm sorry. Yeah. So Satyavati, he was attracted to Satyavati. So so Bhishmadev made the arrangement. He took this vow that not only will I not take the throne, but I won't have any children either. So Shantanu was very happy. So they got married, and they had 2 children. What's his name? Chitragupta. No, not Chitragupta. Chitrangada, right? Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. So Chitrangada, he was a fairly young man, but he was the oldest, so he was the king, or he was supposed to be the king. But there was a Chitrangada Gandharva, and he apparently didn't like that he had the same name, or for some reason he picked a fight with him, and they fought for a long time, like years it seemed like. Then I think it was 3 years they fought. So finally the Gandharva won, and Chitrangada, the son of Shantanu, he was killed. So then I left Vichitravirya, and Vichitravirya, he was young, so Bhishma was the regent. He was sort of ruling in his place. But when he got a little bit older, it was time for him to marry or at least get betrothed. So Satyavati, she asked Bhishma, can you get wife or wives for Vichitravirya? So there was a Swayamvar being held, with 3 girls, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. So Bhishma Dev went there, and anyway, he won the girls and brought them back. But one of them, Amba, she said, I've already given my heart to Shalya. This is actually the same Shalya that Krishna kills later. So I've given my heart to him. And she said, and Bhishma Dev, okay, you can go back to him. But when she went back to Shalya, he said, nah, you've been touched. I saw Bhishma Dev touch your hand, and he was taking you away. So you're spoiled now. So he said, I can't have you. So she went back to Bhishma and said, you have to take me back. He said, no, I've taken my vow. This Bhishma Dev's vow caused a lot of problems for different people. So she became very angry. Actually, there's a whole story of her. She went to some sage and underwent austerities for a long time. And because it was all about revenge. I'm going to get this Bhishma. So later, of course, she was born as Shikandi, who was first a girl, then became a boy, which also caused some problems in the family. And then she, in the Battle of Kurukshetra, Bhishma Dev knew who she was, so she was placed, how does it go? She stood in front of Duryodhan, was it? Arjun. Oh, Bhishma shot her as a Bhishma from behind. But Shikandi, Bhishma wouldn't, oh, I see, right. Shikandi was used to protect Arjuna from Bhishma. So then with Chitravirya, he was still young, and he died. I think he died after 7 years he was king or something, and he had no children. So they were left with Ambika and Ambalika. And so Satyavati says, Bhishma, I think you should impregnate these girls. And he says, no, sorry, Mom. That's not going to happen. So then Satyavati revealed to him, actually I had this, I have a son. I never told you about Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva? Oh, how about that? My brother is Vyasadeva. So she called Vyasadeva there and asked him to impregnate these girls. So first, Vyasadeva, because he's just into austerities, very severe austerities, and part of his austerity is to never clean himself. He lets his hair grow and his nails grow and everything grows. So when everything grows, not very attractive. And he's very dark, so he's actually quite ugly, apparently. So when Ambika, first, he approached Ambika, so she just closed her eyes, and as a result of that, Dhritarashtra was born. And then when he went to Ambalika, she just sort of cowered in fright at seeing the sage. So then Pandu was born. So Pandu means pale. So he was pale and frail. And so Dhritarashtra was not, and then the third time actually, because both of these sons had some defect, then Satyavati said, Ambalika, can you do it again? Maybe get a better result this time. So Ambalika, she thought about it and said, well, no, I'm not doing that again. So she said she sent her maid in instead. So her maid, she was actually, apparently had a pure heart. Maybe she knew something about who Vyasadeva was, this great sage. Oh, I can have a son by this great sage. So she had Vidura as her son. So we know what a great soul Vidura was. So Bhishma Dev actually raised these boys, trained them up and everything. They were all highly qualified. Each one was known for something special. Dhritarashtra was the strongest of the three. Pandu was a great warrior. And, right? Pandu, Dhritarashtra, of course Vidura was saintly. Actually, Pandu was an expert in archery. And Vidura, of course, he was the saintly and knowledgeable one and who had the best character. So these sons, of course, they grew up, and we know, of course, Pandu, what happened to Pandu was Pandu was the next in line, because he was the second oldest after Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra couldn't be king, so he was supposed to be the king. But somehow he killed a sage and his wife who were about to mate or mating. And then he was cursed that if you ever try to, unite with your wife, then you'll be killed. So, Pandu, he was married to Kunti Devi, which is another whole story, and Madri. So when Pandu got this curse, they just went into the forest. He basically renounced. He said, "I'm not going to be the king." So they went into the forest, and he had this inclination apparently. Pandu, he liked that kind of life. So anyway, after some time, well, Pandu wanted sons, so then Kunti told about her boon. She explained how Durvasa Muni had given her the boon that she would be able to call any devas. So Pandu said, "Wow, that's pretty far out. Let's call somebody. Get on the line right now. Get an email out there." So he said, "Well, who should we call?" "Oh, we want a religious son, so let's call Dharmaraj." So she invoked Dharmaraj. And then, of course, you know the story. Then Dharmaraj came and Yudhishthira was born. And then Vayu to produce Bhishma, so powerful, or Bhima, to produce Bhima, so powerful. And then Indra, the king of the gods, to produce Arjuna. And then, of course, Madri, she was jealous. She didn't have any children. Her sister had 3. So Satyavati, on her behalf, she said, "Why don't you let her, call someone?" So Madri was intelligent. She thought, "Well, why should I call just one? I'll call the Ashwinis, Kumar. There are 2 of them. They're kind of like one. So I'll call both of them. They always come together." So she called them, and then she had Nakula and Sahadev. So they were, of course, Pandu died, and then Dhritarashtra, of course, Prabhupada mentions in the Krishna book, because he's called Vichitravirya, the son of Vichitravirya. So if he were actually the son of Vichitravirya, then he would be legitimate heir to the throne. But he wasn't, because he was blind, and also because he wasn't actually conceived by Vichitravirya. Of course, Pandu wasn't either, but Prabhupada doesn't talk about that. He mentions that Vichitravirya was not actually the heir to the throne. So, of course, Dhritarashtra, his problem, as mentioned here in the purport, was he was attached to his nasty sons. Duryodhana was always, imagine trying to kill the Pandavas. The whole history is so amazing. Try to match it up. I spent some time actually recently trying to do the chronology of Krishna's life. And of course, because it intersects with the Pandavas' life, it's a little easier. You look up the Mahabharata chronology, because there are many, it's given very definite in the Mahabharata that on this, solar, whatever, it's an astrological time is given for a lot of the events in the Pandavas' lives. So you can find out, for example, when Krishna was 50 years old and this happened to the Pandavas, you can kind of trace out Krishna's life somewhat. So it's quite interesting. So here we see, of course, this is the time that the Pandavas are fairly young at this point. So but already it's mentioned, I think it was in one of these purports earlier in this chapter, that Kunti Devi was lamenting. They tried to poison us. Duryodhana and company, they tried to poison us. And Dhritarashtra, he always got bad advice from Shakuni, and especially they were always in cahoots, Shakuni and Duryodhana. Shakuni is Gandhari's brother. So, always getting bad advice. And as we'll read, quite a famous statement by Dhritarashtra, I think it comes up tomorrow, where he says, "I'm hearing what you say, but it doesn't stay in my heart. I know you're giving me good advice. I agree with what you're saying, but I just can't do it. I just can't do it." We may react like that ourselves sometimes. We hear so many encouragement for being more serious in spiritual life, and sometimes, boy, I wish I could do it. I wish I could do a little bit more and better. So what do we do? And all we can do is pray to Krishna for help, because it's not up to us. Dhritarashtra, finally at the end, because Vidura, of course, he never gives up on Dhritarashtra. He's always giving him such good advice and pushing him and pushing him. Even in the, it seems that the context in the Bhagavatam, sometimes when Vidura is there speaking to Dhritarashtra, saying really heavy things, that there are other people around listening in on the conversation. And so Vidura is sometimes really quite heavy with him. And of course, one thing we see, which is so nice in the Bhagavatam, is that how Yudhishthira was so respectful. Even though, look at how implicated Dhritarashtra was with horrible things he did because of his son, still, King Yudhishthira, Dharmaraj, he always gave him great respect. Went to see him every day. That's what we hear about when Vidura convinces Dhritarashtra to leave home. Then Vidura is doing his part of his daily sadhana, was to go to offer his obeisances to Gandhari and Dhritarashtra. So he always gave them such great respect, and Vidura, he always gave him such good advice. So finally, at the end, and with the help of Narada Muni also, he was delivered, received some kind of perfection. So, I guess the lesson there is the devotees don't give up. They keep trying, and even a heart that doesn't seem like it's ever going to change, it can change. Santa eva shichindanti manovyasangam uktibi. The devotee's words can cut through that, the knots of the heart and the whatever stops us is blocking our way. So devotees keep giving good advice, even though at first it's not always taken and followed. All right, we'll stop there with our Mahabharata lesson for today. So besides misspeaking a few times, I don't know if I missed up any parts of the story. Anybody like to add anything? Yeah. A question? Uh-oh. Hope it's not a detail that I don't know. Somebody can help me with it. Dead batteries? Okay.
So the question is, if you look at what Prabhupada gave us in terms of sadhana, Ravindu gave practices were controlling less, and many grastas in the society are strictly following, knowing the six texts, knowing the observation. They seem to be much more elevated than some of the personalities we are clear about in Hare. So how does, but at the same time, there's human evolution, because we have regressed. And these are nasty times, we are told. This is Kali Yuga. While those times were different, people were, like you started the lecture, much superior. So how do we reconcile these two things?
Well, it's just that the people, well, we read in the Mahabharata how people who are, well, they're glorified often, but some of the things they do don't seem to be right, at least according to our principles. We follow 4 regulative principles, we chant Hare Krishna, we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, but we're coming from such a low background. So it's sort of like, why is that, or how do we fit these two together? One thing I always think about is that the times that we hear about all these miracles and curses, and things are just really different back then, really different. And people were different. And one thing, and they can also, one thing we often see is that, what is it, there's that statement of, I think it was Churchill or somebody said something about a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds or something like that. So if you're broad-minded, then you can accommodate contradictions. And that just like Lord Brahma, for example, or Lord Indra. Indra's always getting in trouble, but at the same time, he's a devotee of Krishna. He worships Vamana. Vamanadev lives there on his planet, and he's worshiping him. He's his brother. So that's Indra, but at the same time, he does these things that we say, why did he do that? So somehow, Tejiya Sama Doshaya, we're not supposed to judge them and criticize those kinds of things. So part of the explanation for it is just that they're different people, and of course they're living in a culture that somehow these things sort of get taken care of. Now, as far as our position, of course, we can answer the why we're so fortunate. It's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and just raised us up from the lowest of the low. Imagine how many times we would have been cursed if there were sages around to curse us for things we did before we came to Krishna consciousness. We'd all be worms or worse. So, actually, I think some people do get cursed to be worms. I think there's some stories like that. So we're in a more fortunate situation. Now, of course, Punar Mushika Bhava, we can quickly go back to being mlechas. It's just by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. We follow the order of the spiritual master. That's the purport of that story. Again, become a mouse. As long as you're respectful and follow the spiritual master and don't offend him, then you can stay in an elevated condition as a tiger. But as soon as you displease, then the bottom can fall out and drop back down to horrible existence. Of course, we'll never lose what spiritual credit is there, but so we're being supported by the spiritual master. The power of the spiritual master, the parampara, is keeping us up, even though we come from such a low state. Trivikram Prabhu?
Also, these people, they were following the Varnashram Dharma, and especially Kshatriyas, they were allowed to have many wives, and even the rulers, see, but they still follow religious principles. I mean, so even though they have many wives, it's not like illicit connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that some of those principles of Kshatriya Dharma, they seem a little unusual.
Yeah, it's a little different. A woman approaches
hard
you
for
as
us
a
to relate
Kshatriya,
to sometimes.
you can't neglect her. So
It's just like if a woman comes to you, and then you have to accept her. So imagine if that were. I remember doing book distribution. You get those kinds of things happening to you, So obviously our devotees can't respond in the same way.
One point on Dhritarashtra also, Srila Prabhupada commented that he was blind physically, but philosophically also he was blind.
Yeah,
so that was
spiritually he was blind also. That was a worse blindness. Where was it I saw? What was it? He was allowed to see something for a moment. I forget what it was. Oh, yeah. Well, the Bhagavad Gita. I think he was allowed to see his children after the battle. I think he was allowed to see them. Seems to me I saw that by the blessing of Vyasadeva. For a moment he had some vision. After they had died, actually. He had some kind of vision. Madhumati?
Two things. One thing is Arjun. I just recently heard that when they call Yudhishthira, he was, religion personified, and then Bhima, he had strength. And then when they called Arjun, they thought, oh, okay, well, we have somebody with, religion and strength. And they said, well, let's have somebody that has religion, strength, and skill. So actually Arjun had all those apparently. And then another thing I heard one time in, I think Radha Govinda Maharaj said in his lecture that how Krishna spent most of his, the most time he spent on this planet was with Arjun. In other words, he spent a lot of time with Arjun.
And he was the same age, so among the brothers, he was naturally, they were naturally friends in that way.
Yeah.
Janmashtami Prabhu?
When Narada Muni cursed Nalakuvera and Manigriva, it was a boon.
Right.
But sometimes it seems like these curses that the sages, Vedic sages, are kind of vengeful.
Yeah, but actually I was thinking of that in this pastime, that things seem to turn out well for all of them in the end. Ganga Devi, Sikazar, and Bhishma, look at, certainly turned out fine for him. Get the personal association of Krishna, and Krishna's there on his deathbed. So, yeah, although a lot of times it does take some time. So these sages, well, just like Durvasa, sometimes he curses people and you wonder, is there any benefit from this? So it does seem like sometimes they're just punishments. But sometimes it depends on because there are different kinds of sages. So according to their power, or according to their devotion, their spiritual qualities, the curse can have different kinds of results also. At least that seems to be from examples that we know. Anecdotal evidence.
At one point about, the first question about how, this is a previous age, all these exalted sages, but they seem to be getting entangled in all of these, liaisons and things. And what came to mind is this verse in the 11th canto, right after the verse about, proving, that Krishna appears in this age as Lord Chaitanya, Krishna Varnam Tuja Krishna. I think it's the next verse of the verse after, describing the glories of this age. We have one in 12th canto, but this is also there, Kaling Sabhaji and Jaya Gunagyasa Bhagina, that those who really know things and can understand the essence of things, and are Aryans, they worship this Kali Yuga, because just by practicing congregational chanting, all of one's swarta, all of one's real goals in life can be achieved. So this idea of Madana Mohan, because so much of what you're talking about is, come on, a breeze blows and I got to get married, it's hard to even conceive of that level. But Krishna is Madana Mohan. If you really take that's the first manifestation, first of the deity. It means bewildered as the god of Cupid. It means he can sublimate your sex desire. So if we really take part in the Sankirtan movement properly and fully surrender Lord Chaitanya, then we can go beyond that. In other words, we become blessed to get out of this whole material world and not get entangled. So but if we don't, then we're much worse off. Then we stay and go down. Whereas these great souls, demigods, they're at a different level.
What I heard Gopi Pranadana explaining that he was talking about the Bhagavatam, I think, but the Mahabharata to it applies. He said, why are we hearing so much about kings? Because who wants to hear about sages? What do? They don't do anything. They just sit around and meditate all day. But kings, they have all kinds of things, especially you're talking about romance, romance and violence, sex and violence. That's what people are attracted to. So that's what the Mahabharata is, to get your attention, just so you hear eventually the Bhagavad Gita. So the stories, I was singing, maybe, reading the Mahabharata isn't the same as reading Chaitanya Charitamrita or Srimad Bhagavatam. But if you have some proclivity to listen, to be attracted to non-Krishna conscious entertainment, try the Mahabharata. That's definitely a step up from watching whatever is available on the tube. Stita Deepavu.
Yeah, that was an interesting point about the whole sex and violence thing, because that's basically what people are enamored by in conditional life, and yet, at least one level of appreciation I have of the Mahabharata, that whole issue is just, as Trivakram was referring to, is being dealt with within this sort of Vedic context.
Yeah.
Because that's just life in the material world. It's not like unique to Kali Yuga or us. It's just how it is in the material conditional life. And here they're doing their stuff that we want to avoid, but then they're rectifying and dealing with it within that therapeutic cultural setting.
Yeah. There's so much discussion of Dharma at every turn in the Mahabharata, too. Whenever there's some predicament, then a lot of times some sage will come on, or Vyasadeva appears, and there's long debates about fine points of Dharma. So you can see how that's a thread that runs through the whole thing, always a consideration of Dharma. So it's not just gratuitous sex and violence. It's there with a purpose, serves the purpose of enlightenment ultimately. All right, we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
still there. The yellow marigolds.